Defense pick up one touchdown. Kick game pick up one touchdown. We got this game won.
Welcome back to Skuchdown Report, an all-inclusive deep dive into the inner workings of the Chase Estates Fantasy Football League. I'm your host, Austin, aka A-Dub, and I missed you guys. It's been 2 weeks since I've made a recording, and I'm very excited to be back with you guys here. I have no special guests with me today, but I just want to give a special shout-out to Las Vegas, who recently canceled the When We Were Young Festival, which was a festival of, all emo bands. They canceled it because there was a lot of wind going on, apparently, in the Las Vegas area. So I wore this shirt to pay respects to probably the greatest band ever made. Also, probably one of the greatest female vocalists of all time. We love you, Haley. Gretchen is now informing me they only canceled Saturday. I don't care. The shirt's still fire. Shout out to Paramore. Having said that, though, welcome into episode... I forget which episode this is, honestly. I'm sure it said it before. Well, welcome back. I missed you guys. It's been a long time since I've been able to make a podcast. I'm sad I don't have any guests with me today, but I'm very excited because today's episode is the middle of the year award ceremony. Okay, I'm very excited to give out some awards. I'm also sad to give out some awards because I will be receiving some of the worst awards. So we're going to get straight into just that. We'll go over some scores and standings later, but first things first, I want to get out of the way the awards show. So without further ado, I give you the Chase Estates 2022 half-year award show. So our first award of the night goes to the Best Manager Award, and I am filming this on October 24th after the Monday night game, and the dragon has been slayed. Michael Phillips actually took his first loss this week, propelling Dan into the Best Manager. And some of you may be asking, why is Dan the Best Manager? And let me explain, okay? They are both 6-1 currently. However, Dan has 705 points for, where Mike only has 670. And in my opinion, and in our tiebreaker's opinion, that gives him the best manager halfway through the year. Congratulations to Team Dan and the Tegrity Farm Towels on being the number one manager halfway through the year. Getting to our next award, we're going to go for the worst manager of the year so far, and we were treated to a barn burner this week. It was a special treat all around, okay? Nugget played Tom in the 0-6 Bowl, and we truly got an answer to who was the worst team in the league going into Week 8, and that team is Captain Jack Dawson, Christopher Phillips, and the worst team in the league. He is currently putting up 471 points. That is almost 60 points from his next opponent. Nuggets having a rough year. I hate that I put that hex on him, but it's looking like he's going to be in the toilet bowl with what could be myself, to be honest with you. But congratulations to Nugget for being the worst team and potential suitor of the number one overall pick next year. Halfway through the season, we'll see if you can turn it around. We'll see how that goes. The next award we're going to be giving, we kind of gave it away with the first award, but it's going to be the most points for. So this team has had the most electric offense so far through halfway through the season, and this team is, by 0.6 points, the Tegrity Farm Towels have 705.5 points for, making them the number one offense in our league, and they are currently the number one team in our league. I do want to give a special shout out to the Kareem Pies and Zach, who is having a monumental season, but he does come in second with 704.9 points. Tough loss. He almost had that crown, and for the amount of shit that he's been talking, you would have sworn he was 100 points clear of the next player. However, Zach is the second best manager in terms of points for. Congratulations to both those gentlemen. Dan taking away 2 of the first 3 awards. The next award is going to be least points for, and I gave this away. There's a trending theme going on here, but the worst points for so far is, again, Captain Jack Dawson. Nugget, I'm sorry. I think we'll stop talking about you after this, but Nugget's putting up 471 points, which is 60 points worse than the next player, which is Tom. Both of those gentlemen were 0-6 going into this week. However, Tom's team does look more promising. Congratulations to Nugget for not only being the most losing team, but also the worst team overall. Hopefully he can pick that up, like I said. We'll see what happens. The next award is going to be the Waiver Wire King. This is going to be the player who has made the most moves on the waiver wire, and surprise to no one, the team that has been fighting for their life and currently in last place in our league, Captain Jack Dawson, Christopher Phillips, comes in with a whopping 20 moves on the season, compared to the next, which is 16 from Copo's second boyfriend. Jim has also been hot on that waiver wire. However, Nugget is 4 moves above him. And from the looks of it, it looks like his team might be taking a step forward moving forward. We've been saying that for a few weeks, but congratulations to Nugget on having the most moves so far in the year. And the next award goes to the least amount of moves. This player was able to make it to, I would say, middle of the pack right now. He's currently placed in 8th place. We'll see how that changes next week. But with only 5 moves on the season, so pretty much sticking to his guns, we have the Barack Obama-ups and Colton Longdong with 5 moves on the season. That is pretty impressive. We will talk about Colton's team later and how the build of his team is interesting. However, what do I know? I'm currently in 10th place in one of the worst teams in the league, so who am I to judge anyone else's team's build up? However, congratulations to Colton on being able to go 3-3. I believe he's 3-4 now after this week, with only 5 moves. Congratulations to you, my friend. So, honorable mention for the best quarterback of the year. I want to give a special shout out to a few of these gentlemen. I want to give a special shout out to Lamar Jackson, who's currently coming in as QB3 on the year. He was off to a hot start. He had a few rough weeks, but I want to shout him out for the mid-month award because I do believe by the end of the season he might end up being QB1. We'll see how that goes, but I want to give a shout out to Action Jackson Lamar. Make sure you pay that man. And QB2 goes to Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes has an outstanding season. He's currently on Tom's team, and he's the reason why Tom is able to have a fighting chance moving forward this year. I want to give a shout out to him, but he's coming in at QB number 2. He's only about 3 points off of our QB1. But the award for the midseason QB1 goes to Joshua Allen. And Joshua Allen is an absolute stud. He's putting up 172 points to date. He's averaging 28 points per game. And he is the reason why Integrity Farm Towels is the number 1 team in our league. Shout out to Josh Allen. He is absolutely hooping. Let's see if he makes it by the end of the year award show. But shout out to him. And I'm just realizing this as I'm filming this, but I absolutely forgot about Joe Burrow. Shout out to Joe Burrow. He has 164 points on the season. He is actually QB3, not Lamar. Lamar's actually QB4. I apologize. That was a little racist of me. But shout out to Joe Burrow. He's hooping over there on Colton's bench. Colton has to start him next week, though, because I believe Justin Herbert is out. So Joe Burrow might be Colton's starter moving forward. I have a strong feeling he will be until Justin Herbert heats up again. So sorry I forgot about you, Joe. Joe Shiesty in the building, y'all. So when we're getting to running backs, first we're going to talk about some honorable mentions. And the number 1 honorable mention for me is Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is coming in as RB number 4 on the season right now, halfway through the year. He's putting up 123 points and averaging 20.6 points. And ironically, all of those points were on Kyle's bench. We'll see if Kyle's able to make that change and if Josh Jacobs is able to keep it up moving forward. But shout out to Josh Jacobs, man. Everyone thought he was dead. Now he's RB4. So we'll see if he's there at the end of the year. Another special shout out to Saquon Barkley, who's RB3 so far. Halfway through the year, he has 128 points and averaging 18. He's officially back, and so are the Giants. Apparently, I've been saying it every year I've been saying it every week that the Giants are dead and they're a fake team. But you know what? Saquon Barkley's out there hooping. So shout out to Saquon. I'm sorry I tainted your name, Saquon. You're an absolute baller. RB number 2 on the year is Nicholas Chubb, and Nicholas Chubb has been propelling the Kareem Pies to their excellent season. He's having a career year so far. He's putting up 133 points. He's averaging 19 points. Yeah, he's having an amazing year. Right now, he has 740 yards already through week 7. That's insane. He's averaging 5.9 yards per touch, and he has 8 touchdowns already. We'll see if he can keep up this historic pace, but I want to give a shout out to him because he is most definitely helping Zach and anybody whose team he's on. So shout out to Nick Chubb. I don't want to take anything away from him. He's absolutely balling. Hopefully he can keep it up. But the award for RB1 so far through week 7, halfway through the year, goes to Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler had a slow start to the season, but he has absolutely dominated these past couple of weeks. Nugget keeps mentioning in the group chat that he's finally taken off, and he truly has. He has 148 fantasy points on the season. That's almost 15 clear of RB2, and he's averaging 21 points per game. And that's impressive considering his first 2 or 3 weeks, he was kind of understated and not necessary. and not necessarily one of the better RBs in the league, but he has absolutely flown the past couple of weeks, and he finds himself atop the RB chart going into week 8. Congratulations to Austin Eckler on being the best running back halfway through the season. So getting into some wide receiver awards, we are looking at some studs on here. I want to give a special shout out to a few of these players. Now, some of these are a little bit farther down than you'd expect, but I just want to give a special shout out to Marquise Brown, who's currently on the IR. He is currently in the top 10 of wide receivers, and I don't think anyone saw him there. I don't think I even saw him there, but I just want to give a special shout out to him because DeAndre Hopkins is back now, and he absolutely held it down for the Cardinals during that time. So honorable mention to Jamar Chase, who comes in at wide receiver 4. He currently has 118 points. He's only 1 point off of being in the top 3. He's averaging 16 points, and I think that's including 2 or 3 games where he only put up single-digit points. So he absolutely popped off a couple of these weeks, and he's the reason why the Integrity Farm Towels are number 1 as well. So shout out to Jamar Chase. He's absolutely balling this year. I have a feeling he's going to be there at the end of the year. Wide receiver 3 coming in is Tyreek Hill. And he's had an interesting up and down season. He's had 3 different quarterbacks, maybe even 4, I believe, up until this point. But he has 119 points, only 1 point off of RB2. He's averaging 17 points. I think he was more of a top-heavy player. I think his first couple weeks were amazing, and then he kind of tailed off. But he's consistent, and I want to shout out Tyreek Hill and that Miami offense, who looks like they're going to be pretty decent. So shout out to Tyreek Hill coming in at wide receiver 3. Wide receiver 2 is going to be Cooper Slut. And Cooper Slut has been absolutely balling this year. He's kind of on one of those offenses where everything gets fed to him, and he's going to eat regardless. I've said that every week, but Cooper Slut has been absolutely consistent every week. A lot of these other players go up and down. Cooper Slut has been consistent every single week. He has 120 points, which is only 6 points off our wide receiver 1, and he's averaging 20 points per game, which is pretty impressive considering that offense looks pretty crappy. So shout out to Cooper Kupp. He comes in as our wide receiver number 2. And the award for wide receiver number 1 halfway through the season goes to Stephon Diggs. And it's pretty impressive to see that Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen are both number 1 in their respective positions. Stephon Diggs has been absolutely balling this year. He is on pace to hit, I believe, 17 touchdowns, which is absurd. He currently has 126 points on the season. He's averaging 21 points. And just to throw some statistics at you real quick, Stephon Diggs, halfway through the season, has 656 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns. He's averaging 13 yards per catch. He's on pace to hit 1,300 yards on the season, which is absurd. With Josh Allen at the helm, I can completely see that happening. Shout out to Stephon Diggs and the AS St. Etienne team for having wide receiver 1. Now, tight end is interesting because it's really hit or miss when it comes to tight ends. And I want to give a special shout out to tight end number 3, the Swift Army knife himself, Taysom Hill. Is currently the 3rd best tight end in the league with 72 points. And I think all of that came from 2 weeks. But I want to shout him out because he is an interesting play going forward. When Andy Dalton's in there, he is just kind of a wild card. And I want to shout him out. He's averaging 12 points on the season, which is pretty impressive in comparison to the other tight ends. So shout out to Taysom Hill over there. Tight end number 2 is Mark Andrews. And Mark Andrews currently has 95.7 points. He's averaging 13. I believe he had 0 points this week. So that's pretty impressive considering he had 1 week off and he's still tight end number 2. He is probably and is the lifeblood of my team, which is scary considering a tight end can be my best player. But I want to shout him out because he's going to have to carry me out of the toilet bowl. And congratulations to tight end number 1 on the season on the Kareem Pies, Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce has almost 30 more points than the next tight end. It is literally him and everyone else. He has 122 points, which in comparison to the wide receivers is only 3 points off of the best wide receiver. So he is almost the best tight end and wide receiver. And if we really want to look into it, he would be in the top 5 of running backs if he was a running back. So shout out to Travis Kelce. He is truly unique, and he's definitely one of those players that's taken Zach to the good standings that he's in. He's averaging 17.5 points on the season. And just to look into some stats here, he already has 553 yards, so he's on pace to hit about 1,000 yards, and he also has 7 touchdowns. 4 of those coming in one of those games. I forget which game, but 4 touchdowns in one game is absolutely absurd. Shout out to Travis Kelce and the Kareem Pies for having the number 1 tight end in the league. So honorable mention for defenses. I want to give a special shout out to the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers, who come in right in that defense number 2, defense number 3. The Patriots are also right there with them too. But all three of those defenses have been solid. I don't even think someone drafted the Eagles, which is pretty impressive. But I want to give a special shout out to them. In terms of actual NFL football, all three of those defenses are disgusting. Our second defense on the year is the Buffalo Bills, which is pretty scary considering they have two of the best offensive players and the second best defense. So like I said before, they're the best team in NFL history. I'm joking, but I'm also not joking at the same time. They're pretty gross. They have 68 fantasy points up until now. But our number one defense is the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm going to put a little asterisk next to them because had the Bills not been on bye this week, the Bills probably would be the number one defense. But I do want to shout out the Dallas defense, who is quite literally carrying Nico's team this year and the Dallas Cowboys, if we're being completely honest. They are flying all over the field. They currently have 79 fantasy points. They're averaging 11 on the season. And that is a tool that not a lot of teams have. I mean, it literally falls off after them. Not a lot of teams are even close to 60 points. So for them to have almost 80 points is pretty impressive. Shout out to the Dallas Cowboys. I absolutely hate you. And the best kicker of the year, with no surprise, is Justin Tucker. Justin Tucker has 73 points, and he's averaging 10 points per game. That's pretty impressive. Ironically, I never take a kicker, but I think I should start because 70 points coming from a kicking position is super impressive and super helpful compared to some of these other players. Special shout out to Daniel Carson for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's doing pretty well too. He's only 1 point behind Justin Tucker. And also shout out to Jason Myers and Graham Gano, who are only 2 points off of Justin Tucker. So outside of those four players, everyone else has pretty much fallen off. But that's pretty impressive that four kickers are at 70 points. That's pretty special. So shout out to Justin Tucker. I believe he's one of Tom's better players. So shout out to Tom's team. So these are going to be my personal awards. These have no merit, in all honesty. These are just my opinions. But I wanted to give some awards straight from me to you so that you know that I see you out there. And I don't just see myself, Nugget, and Zach, because it seems like those are the only three teams we talk about every week. So I want to give some special awards. So the first award I want to give to is the most surprising award. And this award is given to the team that at the beginning of the season I wrote off, that I saw as mediocre to average, and they have impressed me all the way through this season. And that team is Dan Wagon Fan. I mentioned a couple episodes that he is my arch nemesis, which he is, but I want to give him his flowers while he's still here. We talk about Zach's team a lot, and Zach's doing pretty well in this season, but ironically, Dan Wagon's doing better than him, and we've heard almost little to nothing from Dan Wagon. He seems to be a very positive guy, and in all seriousness, Dan, I'm very excited for you to take out Zach. If you're going to be my arch nemesis, you can be Zach's too. He's currently 5-1. He won this week against Golden Grinder, so he's going to go to 6-1. He's going to be atop the league there. I think he's going to be the third best team. But I want to give a shout out to him. I don't think I mentioned him in my playoff teams, and that was mainly out of spite. But I want to give a special shout out to his team because he's doing far better than I thought his team would do. I know DK Metcalf went down this week for him, and Najee Harris has been a question mark for him all year. But he's held it together. He's got some wins, some lucky, some unlucky. But he's put together a good season. Whether or not he's able to finish the season, we will see. But I do want to give you your flowers because at halfway point, your team is probably the most impressive team in my opinion. There's a few teams above you that have better records, but I don't actually think they are as impressive and as surprising as your team. So special shout out to Dan Wagon on winning the A-Dubs Most Surprised Team Award. So the next award is going to be the most surprising team, but inversely. This is going to be the team that I saw at the beginning of the year going to the playoffs and doing very well, and they do not look like they're going to do that currently. So I would give myself this award, but I think that's a little cliche to talk about myself on the podcast. However, I do want to throw out there that I thought my team was better than what it is currently, and we're doing pretty bad. However, the award is going to go to Tennessee State and Tennessee Tom. He got his first win this week, so shout out to him. He did get his first week, but I think I had Tom slated as a playoff team going into the season. And halfway through the season, it looks like if he is going to make the playoffs, he's going to have to win out. And it's completely possible. I don't want to take anything away from his team. I mentioned to Nugget that the difference between his team and Tom's team is Tom's team looks good. And I honestly still believe that. Tom made a great trade in acquiring Deebo Samuel halfway through the year. He still has some good pieces around him like Jonathan Taylor and Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Drake London was a stud up until this week. Who knows what's going to happen? But Tom's team overall looks good. He's got Taysom Hill. We'll see if he actually starts him. Like I said, he's been kind of a wild card every week. But I can see Tom pulling off some wins and getting out of that least surprising team. But I do want to give the award for the most surprising team inversely to Tennessee Tom. Unfortunately, he is currently 1-6, and we'll see if he can make his way to the playoffs. Hopefully he can prove me wrong. So now I'm going to go into some predictions for the rest of the season and take this with a grain of salt because I do hold grudges against certain people, and I also don't have any special guests to retort to me. So halfway through the season, obviously it's a little bit easier now that we know everyone's record. However, I am going to reevaluate my playoff predictions, and I'm going to reevaluate who I think is going to make the playoffs and who I think will make the playoffs. Obviously, we only have half a season to go, so this is a little bit easier. However, I do want to give my top 6 halfway through the season on the outlook for the rest of the season. So right now, I do have Tegrity Farm Towels coming in as the number 1 seed. I believe they're going to be able to get the bye. They currently have the most points for, and I believe they also have the least points against. So I don't know what Dan's doing, but currently he is the luckiest team in the league, and I have a feeling that's going to be able to carry him all the way to the number 1 seed. Shout out to Dan. I have him as my number 1 team. My number 2 team is going to be Mike Phillips, and Mike Phillips currently is looking at, where is he? Mike Phillips is currently undefeated. He just got his first loss. So he's 6-1. It would be a complete disaster for him to fall apart and not miss the playoffs. But I do have him as my number 2 overall team. I think he can keep it up. His team's solid enough where he won't lose some games. And there's a pretty big difference between the good teams and the bad teams. The end of his last 4 games are probably against 4 of the worst teams in our entire league. So I can see him finishing second. And then surprising, but third, I do have AS Saint Etienne and Nico. Nico right now is 3-3. I think he has one of the scariest teams. If I'm being completely serious, I do have Nico going in as the 3rd best team. He's currently 3-3, like I said, but he has a pretty easy schedule on the back half, and I can totally see his team winning. Nico has a few unlucky wins going into week 8. He's had a few weeks where he's been on or off, or he's had like unlucky injuries like we all have, but I truly think Nico's team is one of the better teams. So his team's namesake, Travis Etienne, just got the full role over there in Jacksonville, which I did see coming for a little while. But in addition to that, he has a pretty good team across the board. I think Kyler Murray's finally going to come good now that DeAndre Hopkins is out there. Joe Mixon is solid. He's getting the touches that he needs. I think DJ Moore is going to be traded to a much better team, possibly the Packers, something like that. And I think he'll pick up some value. Unfortunately, Allen Lazard's out right now, but you got to remember, he's got Stephon Diggs on his bench. And when you have Stephon Diggs on your bench, you're going to do well. And like always, the Dallas Cowboys might save you a week or two. But surprise, surprise, I have Nico coming in as the 3rd best team. Now, my 4th best team is going to be Dan Wagon fan, and I mentioned it before as my most surprising team, and I think his team's solid enough where he'll be easily able to make playoffs. He's currently 5-1. I think he just won this week, so he's 6-1. So, again, similar to Mike, it would have to be a complete downfall for him to miss the playoffs. But his team's solid. I actually think he'll do well in the playoffs. We'll do a playoff prediction once we get closer to that. But I think Dan Wagon's going to go far into the playoffs. I have him coming in as my 4th best team. My 5th best team is actually going to be Zach. And surprise to everyone, I know I mentioned before that I had him not making the playoffs. But at this point, I think it's pretty obvious Zach's going to make the playoffs. His team's doing very well across the board. I do have him as my 5th best team. I think that his team kind of slows down in the back half of the season, and he does lose more games than he lost in the first half of the year. But I think with 5 wins currently, I think it's pretty impossible for him to miss the playoffs. And I do think he makes the playoffs, but I do think he scrapes by and just barely makes the playoffs, probably the second to last or the last week of the season. But I do have him coming in as 5th. I don't want to send too much hate his way. I think his team's all right, and hopefully there's no injuries. However, I am putting a hex on you that he will get some injuries. But I do have Zach coming in as fifth. I think his team's solid, and I think he'll do well in the playoffs. And my sixth and final team is going to be a surprise to everyone, but it's the Barack Obamas. And Colton is currently 3-4. He's kind of in that middle group of people fighting. He's going to be fighting, in my opinion, with Maddie, Will, Jim, and Kyle. I think myself, Tom, and Nugget have taken ourselves out of contention for playoffs. But I think out of those four teams there, I do see Colton's team coming out on top. And I'll tell you why. He has two quarterbacks, which is going to help a lot going into the back half of the season because inevitably someone's either going to get hurt or they're going to have a dry spot. And I think it's great to have two of, I would say, the top 5 quarterbacks, maybe even top 7 quarterbacks. Joe Burrow's flying currently, but I do think later into the season, Justin Herbert's going to come alive. And it's going to be great for Colton to be able to switch those two and to retain a top 5 quarterback when all of us are struggling on the waiver wire to find quarterbacks. Colton just picked up Gus Edwards, which was a great pickup. He's going to be a starting running back all the way up until playoffs. So he will need to find a replacement for him once he gets to the playoffs. But I do think Gus Edwards and Ezekiel Elliott can take him to the playoffs. Jerry Jeudy has been mentioned in a whole bunch of different trade rumors. I think I saw somewhere that he was supposed to go to the Dolphins. I don't know if that's a perfect fit, but if Jerry Jeudy can find his way out of Denver and onto a good offense, I think that's going to help him a lot. He may not have the most flashy team and he may not have the hottest names, but I do have Colton winning some lucky games. Again, if you look at his schedule, he plays 4 of the worst 4 teams in the back half of the season. So I truly think he's going to be a beneficiary of playing myself, Tom, Nugget. I think he also plays Kyle again too. Not to say that Kyle's terrible, but he'll have easier matchups where some of these top heavy teams are going to be playing each other going into the last couple weeks. And I think that's going to hurt them where it's going to help Colton. He'll be able to gain ground. And I do have Colton making the 6th pick. And we're going to get to our toilet bowl predictions. Obviously, we'll have a consolation bracket where the bottom, 4 teams will be, where the bottom 6 teams will be able to fight it out to see who has to do whatever the punishment is this year. I'm sticking to my guns. I think I had Kyle against Nugget in the toilet bowl. And I'm sticking to it, Nuggets team does not look like it's going to get any better. I know what's-his-name just got traded. I know James Robinson just got traded, but I truly don't see Nuggets team and Dak Prescott making it out of that toilet bowl. I think he's destined. However, I do have Kyle going to the toilet bowl, and I'll tell you why. Kyle is a great team, in my opinion. He has a solid team across the board. I think he's going to have 2 of the best keepers going into next year and potentially Jalen Hurts and Dameon Pierce. I think that's a solid 2 young 1-2 punch to have going into next year. But I just have a feeling that with his team makeup that it could just fall apart very quickly. I mean, Josh Jacobs is doing amazing, but he is inevitably going to turn into himself. Scary Terry's coming alive. But when I look at Kyle's team across the board, I can just see his team never clicking all at the same time. He may have some week where 2 players have 30 points and the rest have 2, but I don't really see this team clicking every week together. And for that reason, I have Kyle unfortunately making it to the toilet bowl. But hopefully he can prove me wrong. Nugget too, I truly do. I hope that they can both prove me wrong. But that's my predictions going into the end of the year. Let's talk about some matchups from this week. So looking at some matchups from this week, we'll start with myself versus Maddie Will, and we'll get through this fast because this is a pretty terrible game. I only put up 58.1 points. That was the worst on the week for anybody, and I won't make excuses. My team is absolutely garbage. We got to make some changes. But my top scorer was Jimmy Garoppolo. Shout out Chris Olave on Thursday night, 14. Will Lutz with 11. That's depressing. And Matty Will had a decent week. His kicker had 16 points. Derrick Henry had 15, and DeAndre Hopkins had 15.3. Matty Will put up 89 points. It wasn't a bad week for him, but it definitely wasn't a standout week for him either. He just came up against one of the easier teams in the league. So shout out to Matty Will. He moves to 4-3. I will fall to 2-5. And I'll be fighting for my life down there. The next game we have is Dandwagon Fan versus Golden Grinders, and this was a show me game for Kyle. Unfortunately, he did lose to Danwagon, who, like I said, I have him up there as one of my best teams moving forward. Danwagon put up 112 points this week. Austin Eckler had 30. He's still flying. Aaron Jones had 24 points. He's probably the only good thing that came out of that game. And his Tennessee Titans had 19 points. That's pretty impressive. Kyle did start Josh Jacobs, and he put up 35 points, but unfortunately, he could not get the win. Damian Pierce put up 13, and Christian Kirk put up 13. Kyle had a great week also. He put up 95 points, but unfortunately, Danwagon's flying right now. Puts up 111, moves Danwagon to 6-1, and it takes Kyle down to 2-5. Down there fighting with me and Nugget. So the next game we have is Copo's second boyfriend versus Tegrity Farm Towels. This is a great game. I think Jim really needed to win this game if he was if he was going to truly contend for one of the better teams, but he still has a chance. Jim put up 100 points, which again, that's better than three of the four teams we just talked about. But Eno Benjamin, great pickup for him, had 20 points. Trevor Lawrence had 18 points, and Saquon had 15 points. Not a bad week for him at all. Actually, a pretty impressive week, but unfortunately, he came up against the heaviest hitting team in our league, the Tegrity Farm Towels, number one scoring team. He had Jamar Chase put up 29 points on him. Kenneth Walker came alive with 28 points, and the Arizona Cardinals came away with 14 points. And I just want to take a moment to say, I'm not going to make this mistake again. Every year, the first 2 weeks, I just willy-nilly pick up people off the waiver wire, and I blow all my waiver picks, and I never think about it. And then right around now, week 4, week 5, week 6, there's a really big injury, and there's like these really great players out there, like Kenneth Walker, like Eno Benjamin, like Gus Edwards. I mean, Gus Edwards wasn't necessarily a pickup, but you have these players on the waiver wire, and I look at the waiver wire, and every year I'm 12th, and it's because I put in a waiver every year. So I'm going to fix that next week. Shout out to you guys for not burning your waiver and being able to pick up those guys while I'm stuck starting Tyler Algier. Shout out to you guys. You are clearly better managers than I am. But getting into our next game here, we have Kareem Pie versus the Barack Obama. Zach versus Colton. And Zach had a great week. Again, he put up 120 points. I think he was only 2 points off of the best scoring team in the league, but he put up 120 points. Raheem Mostert had 18.9 points for him. Mike Williams had 18 points, and Nick Chubb had 17. So pretty telling. I mean, his team was universally good. Everyone on his team was very good. They all put up between 10 to 20 points. And when you do that, you're going to be one of the better teams in the league. Shout out to Zach. I always throw hexes on his name. I always say his team's terrible, but pretty good performance. I know he had a down week last week. We'll see if he can continue. I say that every week, but we'll see if he can continue. Shout out to him. Colton had 96 points, though. Another great week, but unfortunately, he came up against one of the better teams. Like I mentioned before, I have Colton going into the playoffs. I do think he'll be able to make it. His team's solid. They just end up getting points every week some kind of way. But shout out to Gus Edwards. Great last-minute pickup for him. 18.6 points, his top scorer. Zeke put up 17. He got a little banged up. We'll see if he gets back. And then Justin Herbert put up 17. I do want to mention that Colton did have Joe Burrow on the bench. I think Burrow put up like 40 fucking points on his bench, so that's pretty crazy. I don't know if he would have won by starting Joe Burrow, but still, I mean, that's pretty crazy that he was on his bench and he put up that many points. But getting to our next game, we have Tennessee State versus Captain Jack Dawson. This was the stink fest of the year so far. Nugget versus Tom. Both teams come in at 0-6, but Tom won. Tom put up 98.7 points, which is pretty impressive. Tom would have beat the majority of the league this week, not just Nugget. But he put up 98.7 points. Pat Mahomes put up 26 points for him. Kittle put up 18. Justin Tucker put up 13, staying with that kicker number 1 spot that he has there. Captain Jack Dawson, Nugget had a pretty down week. Mondre Stevenson put up 19 on Monday Night Football. Fart Prescott had 12 points. Tony Pollard put up 12 points. Nugget's really leaning in on that Dallas Cowboys. We'll see how that pays off for him, Dan. Nugget put up 68 points. I won't talk too much crap about him because I put up 58 points, but pretty disappointing for Nugget. He comes in as the second worst manager on the week if I was not in the league. And the next game we have is Airsoft Thugs versus AS Saint Etienne. This is Mike versus Nico. And Mike had a good week. Mike came in undefeated. He had 105. Again, that would have beat the majority of the league. Mike Evans put up 14. Sad to see. Mike Evans dropped a touchdown, I believe, to start that game. Kamara put up 14, and Breece Hall put up 13. RIP Breece Hall. We will see how that pans out for Mike. AS St. Etienne, though. Dallas Cowboys put up 22 points for him. Top performer. Travis H. St. Etienne put up 17 points, his namesake there, and Joe Mixon put up 16 points. Good week overall for Nico. I mean, I talked down on his name before, but I think Nico's one of the better teams, and I think he ends up making playoffs. He had a solid overall game with 116 points. I believe he was the third best manager on the week, so shout out to him. Looking at next week, I'm not going to go over every matchup. I'm just going to give my thoughts on my predictions, who I think is going to win the game. So starting with myself versus Jim, quick history lesson. I don't think I've ever lost a game to Jim in fantasy history. I think I'm undefeated up until this point. I do think this is my first loss this week, though. I am going to give Jim the win. My team's pretty terrible, and Jim's team is pretty good. They've just been performing bad, and I think they come back this week to beat me. So I do have Jim winning in that game. Second game we have is Dan Wagon Fan versus Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is Dan versus Matty Will. Matty Will won this week against me. Dan Wagon's flying currently. I don't think it's too... Let me go ahead and look into this game here real quick. So pretty big line on this game, but I do have Matty Will winning this game against Dan Wagon. I think Dan Wagon's going to have a good season moving forward, and I'm not just making this prediction because Dan Wagon's my arch nemesis. I truly think Matty Will wins this week because Austin Eckler's on bye. I think that's the lifeblood of Dan's team. We'll see if he can make some changes to fix that, but currently I have Matty Will winning that game, but we will see who wins that game. Next game we have is Godin Grinders versus Kareem Pie. This is Zach versus Kyle. I'm sure we will hear a lot of shit talking this week between both of these guys, as they are one of the two more active people in the group chat. And surprise, surprise, I'm not picking Zach again, and this is not out of spite. I truly believe this is one of the weeks where Kyle's team goes off for him. Zach's not really dealing with too many buys per se. He does have Travis Kelce out this week, so I don't think that's going to help him. But I truly just believe this is one of the weeks where Kyle's team truly eats. I mean, his teams are playing some of the worst teams. I think Jalen Hurts is going to absolutely dunk on the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. I think Kyle's going to win that game. Again, Zach, I don't think your team's bad. I just think you have an unlucky week. I think Kyle goes off this week. The next game we have is Integrity Farm Towels versus Tennessee State. This is Dan versus Tom. Tom coming off a big first win, and Dan coming off another big win. He's 6-1, and Tom is 1-6. So pretty polar opposites here. And, I would love to pick the upset here, but I am going to go with Dan. I think Dan has a strong team going into this week, and Tom doesn't have Patrick Mahomes, one of his better teams. Patty Mahomes is on bye. I think Tom loses this week, but hopefully he can get some wins moving forward. But that's my prediction for this week. Next game we have is the Barack Obamas versus the Aerosoft Thugs. Mike coming off his first loss of the year. Colton also coming off a tough loss to Zach. This line comes in pretty strong. Again, I would love to pick the upset here, but I am going to go with Mike and the Aerosoft Thugs. He's got Lamar Jackson back off of bye. We will see who he replaces Breece Hall with, but he does have some good options on the bench there. Yeah, so I'm going to go with Aerosoft Thugs. I think he has a solid week. I think this is a pretty rough week for Colton. All of his players are playing pretty tough matchups. Cooper Kupp's playing against San Francisco. That seems to be like his Achilles heel, and I believe he's going to have to start Joe Burrow this week, and he's at Cleveland. Cleveland's defense isn't terrible. I just don't think Joe Burrow gets it done in Cleveland this week. So I've got the Aerosoft Thugs winning this week, but I do have Colton getting to the playoffs eventually, just not this week. And the last game we have is Captain Jack Dawson versus AS St. Etienne. This is Nugget coming in at 0-7 versus Nico, who comes in at 3-4. And the line opens up pretty big in Nico's favor. However, I am going to take Nugget to get his first win this week. I know it seems like I'm favoring him in all these predictions, but I think Nugget's team actually gets a strong boost this week. I don't know if James Robinson's going to start for the Jets this week, but if he does, I think that's a huge boost for Nugget. And I do think that Nuggets team will do fine this week. I mean, Dak Prescott's playing Chicago. They just had a really good game against New England, but I truly think they're terrible, and I think Dak Prescott's going to absolutely ball this week. In comparison, Nico has a great team too, but I think he struggles this week. I don't know if DJ Moore is going to get off to too hot of a start. I mentioned that Cincinnati is going to Cleveland. I think that's going to hurt him with Joe Mixon. I don't think his team really flies this week. And I think Stephon Diggs kind of gets stuck up there in Green Bay. But I'm taking Nugget to get his first win. Bold prediction. I'm going to keep doing it until Nugget does get his first win. But I'm sorry, Nico, it comes against you. But that's the outlook going into week 8. So I kept this till the end because it's probably the most boring part of the episode, but I'm going to throw some injuries out there that you should be paying attention to and potentially people you should be grabbing off the waiver wire. So the first one I have is Chuba Hubbard. He left with an ankle injury and didn't return to the game versus the Bucks, and that's interesting because Christian McCaffrey was just traded and Deontay Foreman seems to be the lead back over there. I believe I picked him up, but if I do end up dropping him, or if he's out there in other leagues, take a look into Deontay Foreman. I think he becomes an RB1, meaning top 12 running back moving forward this year. I truly believe that. That offense is going to run a million times. Injury to Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of my favorite names in the league. He went out with a concussion on Matty Will's team this week. I think he'll be back. I don't know. They've been you got to be careful with concussions now because sometimes a guy can be kept out 2 weeks. So keep an eye on that. Amon-Ra St. Brown might be out for a week, maybe even 2. That stinks. Big injury for the New York Jets. Breece Hall hurt his knee. It seemed to be like an ACL injury. Looks pretty bad. However, they did just trade for James Robinson. I think that was mainly because Breece Hall got hurt. But I know they do have Michael Carter. Michael Carter was already there. He had a pretty decent year last year, so maybe someone to look into on the waiver wire for a week or two while James Robinson gets settled in. But unfortunate to see Breece Hall goes down. He was looking like he was going to be like a potential keeper. But a big injury there. For the Seattle Seahawks, DK Metcalf suffered a knee injury in the first quarter and was ruled out. He was carted to the locker room, and he had an MRI. He had an MRI, and it looks like it's not going to be surgery. So he might be able to get back out there in a week or two, from what Pete Carroll said. But that stinks for anybody who has DK Metcalf. But that could potentially be a boost for Tyler Lockett out there. So if you're looking to make some trades, Tyler Lockett might be a pretty good trade. Someone might be selling low on him without knowing about DK Metcalf. And the other injury, which isn't even really an injury, but I just want to mention it. Today, Matt Ryan was benched by the Colts, which I think is interesting and pretty bold because that's something I think my Commanders should do. I think we should bench even Tyler Heineke, like give Sam Howell a shot out there. Like, what are we winning games for at this point? You know what I mean? We're in the best division in football. Why are we trying to win? Let's throw out Sam Howell. If he wins games, awesome. We know we have a great quarterback. If he loses games, awesome. We get to draft the kid out of Alabama, you know what I mean? But what are we doing trying to halfway win? I think it's very bold and awesome that the Colts benched Matt Ryan, who they're paying like $1 billion for, and they're starting some random kid. I don't even know his name, but from what I've read, he's pretty decent. He's pretty athletic, and hopefully like Cooper Rush, they can kind of give that team a boost. But I thought pretty interesting to throw out there that Matt Ryan is now being benched. So potentially players on the Colts like Michael Pittman or Jonathan Taylor might get their ceiling lowered moving forward. I don't really know if Matt Ryan was raising that ceiling, but something to mention because that was pretty random and out of the blue. But I respect it, Indianapolis. I respect it. But that's all I got for this week. I really missed you guys. It's been 2 weeks. I'm sorry this is a shorter episode. I've got to go to sleep. I mentioned I didn't have an episode last week because I had an interview, and I'm still preparing for that interview, so I've got to get some sleep. I got to edit this and get it out of here. But I'll get out of your guys' hair. I appreciate y'all for watching if you made it this far. Next week, I'm looking to get Nico in here. Nico, we need to talk some Chelsea football, some actual football, and see what's going on over there in Stamford Bridge. But I'll leave you guys with that. I hope you have a wonderful Halloween. I hope you have a wonderful week 8 and a week 9. I will see you next week for sure. By the way, if you guys actually dress up as anyone for Halloween, send me some pictures. I want to feature the best costume on this next episode. But yeah, I'll get out of your hair. This has been the Skuchdown Report. Hope you all have a great week. Peace.